Guys, we're back for our October favorites video, because now it's November. And as you can see, Matt and I got furniture for our apartment. We've got a couch. And as we mentioned last month, we're changing the format a little bit, because we're going to be going through our picks one by one. We're moving the discussion aspect of it, so it'll be shorter and easier for me to edit, and we're gonna start this right now. Okay, it's me kicking it off, and my first pick for the month of October is the brand new movie, The Florida Project. It's a new film by Sean Baker, who is probably best known for making the movie Tangerine from a few years ago. It got a lot of attention for being shot all on iPhones, but beyond that, it was just a great movie. And in this movie, it's similar a little bit in that it stars all non-professional actors with the exception of Willem Dafoe. But in a different direction, he shot this one on film, which is, you know, increasingly a rarity nowadays, and this movie looks gorgeous. It just doesn't look like anything else that came out all year. And so it's all set in this shitty motel, I think in Orlando. Willem Dafoe is the manager of the motel, but he's not the main character. It's mostly about these poor people who are kind of permanent residents of the motel, and follows these kids and their day-to-day lives. What's kind of nice, but also, you know, creates this like underlying sadness to everything is these kids have, you know, bad parents who don't have their lives together, or usually like drug addicts or stuff like that. And these kids are not probably not going to grow up to have good lives, and are surrounded by the sadness that they're not really aware of. But these kids just kind of run off and have their little adventures and get into trouble every day. And there is not a traditional story to it. There's no 3-act structure, and everyone is incredible. There's just these fascinating characters, the kind of characters that we don't see movies about. This movie's wonderful and fascinating, and entertaining, and it's funny and it's sad. It's got everything. I'm sure it'll keep expanding into more and more theaters because it's like getting Oscar buzz. Hopefully, no matter where you live, it comes to a town near you, because this movie's great. And I think everyone should go check it out. The Florida Project, new film by Sean Baker, in theaters now.
My turn. We're going to talk about my pick for the month of October. My first one is the show Curb Your Enthusiasm. The big thing I want to say about this show is that there was all this anticipation coming up for it because it ended around 2011. It was a 8-season show. The 9th season just premiered this month. And what I love about the show is that I think everybody had sort of slowly built up hype for when Larry David was going to return and what he was going to do with the new season. 2016 was a crazy year for him, considering all of the stuff revolving around the election, and then he did his impersonation of Bernie Sanders in Saturday Night Live that year, which everybody loved. And so I think there was probably some anticipation as to what he was going to do with the new season this year, and whether or not he would maybe bring in some of the political stuff that was happening last year. And I'm happy to report that the show doesn't do any of that, and it's just as mindless and stupid as it's ever been. And Larry David is just the same sort of nitpicky, self-centered piece of shit that he's always been, and the show's great for it. I think it couldn't have gotten any better. You can watch Curb Your Enthusiasm on HBO Go, so either buy that or find somebody that has it and use their password.
My turn to talk about what I liked. So my first pick, I'm trying to keep things spooky because some of you guys didn't do a very good job of staying on theme. My recommendation is The Happiness of the Katakoris. It had been a while since I'd seen a Miike movie, and I just forgot how batshit that dude is. But The Happiness of the Katakoris is about a family that owns a sort of shitty inn in the countryside. It's doing really poorly financially. The dad's sort of pathetic, and this whole family lives there of these like outsized characters. And they start finally getting guests, but each guest is kind of weird and meets their end in some fashion. Again, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it is absolutely insane. There's random moments that are claymation. It's also essentially a musical. One of the guests commits suicide in this incredibly stylized way, and when they find his body, they break into song. It's one of the funniest things I've seen in a really long time. And there's zombies, and there's dancing, and there's violence. I recommend you guys go and use the streaming site Midnight Pulp. It's got like this weird assortment of like exploitation movies and anime and stuff. It's worth going to. That's where you can watch it for free.
And it's me back with my second pick, which is another thing that is easily accessible to everyone. It is the Netflix original series Mindhunter. which premiered in October. It is the new thing by David Fincher. This is even a more David Fincher thing than House of Cards was, because in that I think he directed the first 2 episodes and just kind of set the style for the show. But in this, he directed 4 of the 10 episodes, I think. Beyond just the style, it really feels like a David Fincher project, and I like David Fincher a lot. But even if I was not as interested in the story of this, I would have enjoyed just watching that beautiful, ultra-precise, clinical David Fincher style that I enjoy so much. So this show, it's set in the 70s, and it's basically about these people working for the FBI who start this new project there. It starts with just these 2 guys, these 2 sort of partners who kind of stumble across this new discovery of hey, maybe if we interviewed these serial killers who are in prison, we can learn more about people who commit these kinds of crimes and start profiling and use it to, to crack more cases and solve murders and stuff like that. And the thing is, the term serial killer didn't even exist at the time. They come up with the term serial killer later on in the season. It is mostly based on true stories and true events. So it's sort of about these FBI agents traveling around the country, interviewing these terrifying sociopathic serial killers. It's sort of a serial killer show that's not really about solving murders and really just talking to people who have committed murders and learning about them and their psychology. So it's really interesting and disturbing and looks great. And what's also kind of fun is, so the main character, played by Jonathan Groff, best known for playing King George in Hamilton. And at the beginning of the show, you're kind of this guy's kind of a weird dork. And it's he's weird. I don't know. He's just an odd personality. And then as the show goes on, you realize, oh, this isn't just strange writing. It's intentional. And he's kind of getting too into this. And the success of the project is kind of making him a worse person as the show goes on. So that's sort of this extra enjoyable, fascinating thing to watch. It's great David Fincher serial killer stuff that is... It's hypnotic and kind of disturbing and really, really interesting. And also, most of the cast is people I've never seen before, giving these incredible performances. So Mindhunter, silly title, great show, on Netflix now. You've probably already binged it in a day, but if you haven't, you should.
Okay, pick number 2. This is another movie that is appropriate for the spooky month of October. I'm picking the movie Pushing Hands by Ang Lee. It's his first movie that he ever made. It came out around 1992, and it was kind of hard to see up until recently, and you can now stream it if you're an Amazon Prime member. So once again, pay for it, or find your friend and steal his username and password and watch it on there. It's a Chinese husband, his American wife, and their 1 son, and they've had to recently bring the husband's father from Beijing to live with them in the house. It's sort of just about the generational issues that people face up against each other when it comes to him bringing his history and the culture that he's used to into the American house. It's one of those great movies that has these long sequences that Ang Lee can pull off really well, where there's almost no dialogue. A good example would be the beginning of the movie. It just opens with the grandfather in the living room, and he's performing his sort of Tai Chi exercises. And then it sort of slowly pans over and you see the American wife, who is a writer, trying to work in the house. And the whole section of this part of the movie is just about how they sort of navigate each other's space. She's clearly frustrated with the fact that he has to live there with her. And he is also kind of mystified by her, outbursts when she does get frustrated, because there's a communication barrier between the two of them. But it's all delivered without any dialogue until finally the husband shows up from work and the son from school. And then you realize, you're kind of confused at first. You don't even know what their relationship is. And you realize, oh, okay, this is actually a family. That's her father-in-law. And they live together. It's an Ang Lee movie, so it's very touching. It's nice and sweet. And the one thing that I would have to recommend about it the most that I liked was that there's a little bit of kind of cartoonishness to it. It comes across as a straight family drama, and then every now and then the grandpa will do something with his special Tai Chi practice where he'll have what seems like almost superhuman strength or powers. And it just sort of pops out of the blue from time to time, and it makes it really funny. There's a great sequence towards the end when he has literally an entire police force trying to move him out of a kitchen, and they can't do it. And That's all I'll say about that scene, but it's fantastic.
Back to me. I'm choosing a book. You guys should really get it. It contains 2 short novels by the Polish writer Witold Gombrowicz. I don't know if that's how you properly pronounce that. Sorry, Reddit lit nerds. It's got a book called Cosmos and a book called Pornografia in it. I think Witold Gombrowicz is incredibly funny. These 2 are like sort of darkly comical, just kind of looks at the absurdity of human life. And my favorite aspect of him as a writer is his ability to take something super boring, like a family all having dinner quietly and saying very little, and really, really expand on the inner dialogue or the inner monologues of everyone, and the really minute observations of people's behavior, and have those blow up into giant significances. Because in both of these stories, it's a lot of like people sitting observing each other and like extrapolating crazy theories from very little. Especially Cosmos is sort of about bored sociopathic university student who's trying to go to an inn and sort of chill out and like do some work, but he ends up getting obsessed with this, I guess you would call it an investigation, but it's just him kind of reading way too much into a bunch of stuff, but then not really. I don't know how to describe it better than that. And then Pornografia is about 2 old men who become obsessed with a young couple who aren't really a couple, but they believe they should be a couple. And then it becomes this bizarre, weird sort of secondhand extraction of eroticism from these young kids and these like old dudes. It's just super funny. I think both of them are really funny. It is Cosmos and Pornografia by Witold Gombrowicz.
Last pick for the month is actually spooktacular, although I feel kind of terrible even calling it that because it seems disrespectful because the movie is actually incredibly bleak. The reason why I wanted to pick it though is because it's a war movie that actually felt like it borrowed from horror movie techniques in order to get its point across. And I can't think of another war movie that does it quite like this. Very underseen, but now easy to get if you get a Filmstruck subscription. So buy it or find somebody and steal their username and password and watch it for free. The movie's called Come and See. I don't remember what. It's a Russian movie. The director is Come and See. And the director is Elim Klimov, I believe. This movie came out in 1985. I'm going to butcher the history of this probably, but I'm going to give it a shot. This movie is about the German occupation of modern-day Belarus. I forget what it was called back in the day during World War II. It stars this young kid. His name's Floria, and he is pulled out of his village. He's conscripted by the army, the Belarusian soldiers, to fight against the occupying Nazi forces. The entire movie is just about the destruction of a little kid's psyche. So if that sounds like a heartwarming endeavor, then go for it, because this is something that I thought was super interesting and worthwhile to watch. You can watch so many World War II movies that are about, the atrocities of the Holocaust and all of that horrible stuff. But this was one of these sort of smaller moments or underrepresented moments in the history of that war. And you watch this kid essentially go from idealistic soldier ready to fight with the army to just utter insanity. And I like this movie. I think it's worthwhile to watch because Elim Klimov is super adept at using music and sound to like the way a horror movie would. He manages to use the like explosions and concussive sounds of bombs and animal sound effects and stuff like that, and music to a very limited effect, where he gets all these scenes that come across as surreal. And in the hands of some other director, you'd have like these big giant epic battle scenes, but instead what he'll go for is a sequence where the young kid Floria and this girl that he's with try and travel through a marsh, and the sequence draws on for about like 10 minutes or so, and it just seems like they're drowning in quicksand the entire time, and it's just absolutely strange. And there's this weird covering over the quicksand. It looks like human skin, and the way that they manage to shoot this stuff just seems kind of surreal. There's a strange scene where a farmer's trying to bring a cow across a field, and then the artillery fire from machine guns somewhere off in the distance start carrying across over the field. It literally looks like laser gun blasts from a Star Wars movie. And it's made even more bizarre by the fact that Klimov apparently decided to use real ammunition. I'm kind of surprised that no situation similar to The Crow happened in this movie, and nobody got shot and killed, but apparently there was some close calls while they were filming it. That was long-winded, but there you go. Go watch that one, too.
Okay, so my final pick is, I think it's technically in the Giallo, Italian Giallo genre. It's called The Messiah of Evil. It's got that classic, like, everything's ADR'd and overdubbed, so all of the mouth movements don't really line up, and it stars a otherworldly beautiful Italian woman. It borrows heavily from the H.P. Lovecraft story A Shadow over Innsmouth, which is a story about a seaside hamlet that has an old one living in the water off of the shores. And these weird fish people rise up out of an underwater city and start breeding with the townspeople, and they get turned into fish people. This doesn't have the fish people aspect, but it's about a seaside hamlet where everyone's sort of in some sort of weird occult cobble together, and they all become flesh-eating zombies. But it's also got this vibe to it that I love all Giallo for as a genre, I think, which is just like the fact of the ADR almost distances you from the reality of the movie and creates this almost like sound booth style claustrophobia. And then the movie itself, like the aesthetics of the movie, all the weird garish 70s colors and the set pieces, actually makes it, for all of its goofiness, a fairly disconcerting movie, I think. All three things that I've suggested are funny, but there is a disturbing tinge to them. And so I hope you enjoy.
All right, I'm back for my final pick, and for my final pick, I'm gonna need Matt and Jake to join me because this is a big one. It's a thing that we all are in agreement on. It is Denis Villeneuve's Blade Runner 2049. Look, we're all back again. We are all very big fans of the original Blade Runner. At least for me, ever since they announced that they were gonna make a sequel a while back, I was extremely nervous.
Yeah, it's a bad idea on paper.
It's just not a movie that where it ends and you think like, oh yeah, I want this to be a franchise and like continue. The ending, you know, aside from the theatrical cut, is kind of ambiguous. And so that's a key part of it. I was skeptical for a while, and then when they hired Denis Villeneuve, I was like, all right, that seems like maybe the one guy I would trust to make this. They also got like the original writer back, Hampton Fancher, which is a great name.
Cool. Harrison Ford back, Ryan Gosling, kind of iffy. We weren't sure about that at first, but they ended up doing a very good job.
I was pretty okay with Gosling. I enjoy almost everything he does these days, but Jared Leto was my big question mark, because he was coming off that performance from last year. And anyway, we all went to see it together, and they did it.
They did it, guys.
They fucking did it.
They did it. It's like, I know some people haven't, like, my sister still hasn't seen it. I keep telling her, Mary, you got to see it before it leaves theaters, because, you know, this movie's not making a lot of money. But, so I don't want to say too much about the story, because we didn't know anything going in, and if you're a fan of the original, there are these really nice surprises that come once you discover, oh, this is what it's about. This is how they're continuing the story of the original. Like, Harrison Ford does not show up for a while. It is about Ryan Gosling, this new character, just kind of like working this case, and then you discover that the case factors into aspects of the original movie in interesting ways. What I think is the great triumph of this movie is that, thankfully, due to Warner Brothers overestimating the brand recognition of Blade Runner and the popularity of that movie.
That's still really funny to me.
Exactly, because that movie was never a hit. They made like $180 million slow, long, weird, really intelligent science fiction movie that's more interested in exploring ideas of, like, you know, humanity
than it is with entertaining you.
I think it looks incredible. I could look at it forever. I love the sound of the movie. I just loved living in that world for 2 hours and 40 minutes. I've seen it twice.
You know how the original Blade Runner movie feels like it's 2 hours and 40 minutes long? This one is. It's great. It's fantastic.
This one is and also feels that way.
Anyway, Blade Runner is really good. You should all, if you haven't seen it, get out and see it, because
it will allow Denis to make a Dune movie if you give him money for this movie.
Which is what he will knock out of the park.
Because this is the thing. This is like a key thing. Matt loves Dune.
I love Dune.
Matt
He hates Jared Leto, and and he loves
You
Dune.
did 2 things about me you need to know. 3 things.
3 things.
I hate
He's
Jared
sick
I
right
hate
now.
Jared Leto. 4 things. I'm sick. I love Dune. I love Nino Cooney.
Matt, you can even call Matt a Nino Cooney enthusiast,
Yes.
if you will. I don't want them to make a Blade Runner 3. There's no point in making a Blade Runner 3. So the success or failure of this movie doesn't impact the Blade Runner series.
Franchise.
What matters is that Denis Villeneuve makes a Dune movie, and Matt gets the Dune adaptation that he has been craving for as long as I've known you.
Hashtag Denis for Dune.
Anyway, that's October. Anyway, as you've seen, we've changed the format of the monthly favorites, so it's shorter, more rapid fire, and we cut out the kind of conversational aspect. And you might remember from last month, I was saying it would be good if we just figured out an idea for a podcast where we could discuss things at length. And all I'll say is that we have figured out an idea for a podcast, and at some point in the foreseeable future, you might be able to listen to that.
Yeah, you
that might
guys.
be a thing that,
Get your ear juices flowing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay,
You know, you-
hang out with your friends, Matt, Pat, and Jake.
feast your ear tongues on those audio pops.
2
So-
hard A's and 1 soft A. Right? You guys feel me?
Jake.